All right, everyone, welcome back to the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm joined with my co-host, Torrey Duckworth. Welcome back, episode 55. Lots going on in the NHL since we last were on the podcast. In that last episode, we're predicting the Seattle Kraken rosters, and let's just say it did not go as we suspected. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a couple other things around the NHL. Contract free agencies all got started. Trades have obviously been popping off. There's so much going on. Torrey proved his Nostradamusness of over $1 billion spent in the market, or however. I guess I didn't even.
It was
realize.
supposed to be over $1 billion spent, like not including buyouts and not including the Seattle expansion. Sorry, not including Seattle expansion.
Yeah,
including buyouts
and we blew
stuff.
past it. So I guess either I didn't. I don't even remember how I took that. I didn't think it was going to happen. Maybe, but
Yeah, I think you thought it was maybe a little high. I think you quickly referenced or insinuated it'd be maybe the high hundreds of millions, but not quite a billion. But I mean, we were at almost 1.4 billion before the first day of free agency even opened.
yeah.
And then in the first day of free agency, 60 contracts were given out, 136 total years, and that was for 405 million on day one.
So lots has gone on basically since we've last been on here. So we're just going to do, I guess, a quick overcap of our takeaways and a couple of news stories that are always fun to talk about quickly. And then we'll be on our way for this fine weekend.
Yeah, you referenced that Seattle isn't quite what we thought it was going to be. I think it's going to take a little while for us to kind of digest and see exactly if they made the decisions that are right for the team. My original instinct right now is to think that they didn't do great.
Yeah.
If I had to give them like a grade, I feel like I'd give them a C minus. Passable, but really a lot of room to improve.
Yeah, and you would think if they're serious and they're going to go into that BA thing, that they still got some things to work out, and maybe it's going to require some games to be played. Who knows what's going to. Hopefully, they still got another move or two left in their pocket before this is all said and done. But you never know. It's very clear that they addressed goalies and defense as their main focus. They're going to build from the net out, which from a new team, I guess, can make a lot of sense. You can get
Who's going to score?
Exactly. That's what
At a pace that's competitive. I know people said that about Vegas as well, but Vegas had some guys that it was kind of like you're like in the secondary unit. You don't have an opportunity to shine. You might shine if you get more ice time, or these guys, it's just kind of like these are just guys, and sure, they might work if you give them ice time. I think a year from now, we might be able to give a better grade just because
Definitely.
the deadline will go and they'll go through the opportunity to make some make
Tweaks.
their team identity and attract some guys maybe who are from the area that want to play for them now that they're a team. But then you add in their draft picks and the trading of draft picks and stuff. I think they have some time to kind of improve that grade. Just not super stoked about the team,
Yeah,
to be honest.
I haven't heard what like Seattle fans, like the city, what their vibe is around. I don't really get what's going on. So I don't know if I had a new team coming in, obviously there'd be a lot of hype to get behind it. So hopefully they have somewhat a competitive team out of the gate and don't go like 1-13 or something. That'd be pretty rough.
Well, I got a tall boy bet with Nick whether Seattle will make the playoffs or not.
Yeah.
Originally, I thought they were going to get Carey Price and draft better in the expansion draft. Once I saw some of the names that they could have,
Yeah.
well, I would have gone after. I was expecting them to be a for sure win in the playoffs and me losing that bet. And I even offered Nick an opportunity to change the bet double or nothing for something else just because I was conceding to the loss of that.
Yeah.
And then they didn't pick Price. They didn't pick a bunch of other guys. And now currently as we sit, they'll be in the playoff race, but I don't think they're a playoff team.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. The only thing going for them is the division. It's probably, at this rate, people are grading it probably the weakest to get a playoff spot in all of the NHL.
I think there's some people sleeping on that division, though, and I think that division
happens,
is still waiting for things to settle.
Always the weakest division. Well, I shouldn't say always. It's looking that way in baseball. The weakest division predicted at the beginning of the season. It's kind of looking like it, too. But Yeah, so that's exciting expansion of always exciting getting those teams going. We've had a crazy number of moves. I'll let you you have some notes there of all the amounts of moves going off. I'll let you kind of lead the way on that.
Yeah, so the again that's so I was tracking how many moves were spent towards that 1 billion amount. And I tracked buyouts, trades, and signings. And again, before free agency even opened, it was 1.05 million, or sorry, 1.05 billion for 149 years, with a total of 190 million towards the cap in this upcoming year. That's the amount of moves that were made prior to free agency, and then 60 contracts with 136 years and over $405 million up until the evening of day one of free agency. And
Wow.
again, keep in mind the NHL says, oh, you're not supposed to talk to free agents unless they're given permission before this time. But
Yeah,
then you have all these contracts, which you got to know the teams, they have their priorities, right? And if they're missing on two, three, four, five, maybe they have to fall to number seven and they offer number seven, four type money. And that settles out like the second and the third tier contract. So for 60 people to be sorted out, they must have been talking for days,
yeah.
if not weeks.
I think it's pretty interesting too. I don't know what's going on with that whole New York Rangers and Goodrow, not Goodrow. Is it Goodrow? Um, all that leaked that they had an agreement, but they're not even supposed to be talking. And then, sure enough, he signs for that exact agreement. Like,
Yeah.
do you think the NHL is looking into this? Because what's the
Oh,
what is the competitive advantage? Arizona Coyotes, they took a punishment. They weren't playing within the rules, right? They took a serious punishment. If you're the Coyotes owner or not, aren't you raising a stink like what? Or do you think New York's gonna get some special treatment?
we look at expansion and we see that basically guys like Frank Saravalli released the team before it even was announced. Like they knew who was the selections and everything, and he was pretty much spot on about everything. And there were some people who accused that there may have been a leak or somebody leaking information from inside the NHL's head offices. Then the NHL's head offices tightened up, and then they started announcing their own press. So I feel like there's something there. I feel like perhaps there was someone or people or some sort of something that was allowing leaks to happen. So like that's about the information coming out, obviously, but and the point still remains, like you said, they've already talked about these numbers. They also had I think it was Dave Poulin or somebody who was a former GM on the show, and he basically was like, you can't be like, hey, your client X name, whatever, I would be interested. But you could be like, you know, that guy that you have, that guy, he's a forward, he likes to shoot the puck a lot, that guy.
That kind
I'd
of
love to
player,
have,
I want that kind of player.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to have that kind of guy on my team. And like, I could really see a guy like that playing on my team. Never saying the name, never saying,
yeah,
6 years, 10 million per, but saying, I could see him getting money like this guy, or I could see him getting slightly more than that guy, or like
makes
stuff like that. You
sense.
can basically line up all the pieces beforehand. So it's all just a charade anyways.
That's
I don't
true.
understand why the NHL just doesn't drop the charade and just say this happens. It is what it is. Although you do have some teams who don't give permission, and then those guys are late to the party in hopes that that team has that guy circle back and get the original contract they offered. So there is still room for some positioning, but not a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. They can just be vague in the way they talk. That yeah, it's just a charade,
Mhm.
charade from time to time.
Same thing. But yeah, the one thing that's quite impressive as well is the amount of defensemen who are getting $9 million contracts. We've seen Nurse, Makar, Werenski, Hamilton, Jones, and probably some more guys coming up in this next couple off seasons to make similar type money.
Yep,
Um,
Quinn Hughes coming up.
yeah, one of the first guys to make that type of money was PK Subban, and everybody said that that was crazy money. And remember, that was him taking less than what he originally was going to be offered, somewhere in the 12 and a half range or whatever
Yep.
it was. And it's just kind of interesting to see. I know that you had a bit of an interesting philosophy. Why don't you take it away with that?
Yeah, you're talking about how I think
The
people.
Leafs, the defense team,
Yeah, so like
teams going
some
against.
teams, it's just turning into a different strategy in how you're gonna have to build your team, considering the salary cap. Like a lot of people get mad at the Leafs. They spent all this money on forwards. and they don't really have any defense. And you were talking about how Morgan Riley's he's going to be coming up for contract negotiations in the near future, and the Leafs fans are starting to panic, like, man, we're going to have to pay this $9 million. And in my opinion, teams that like the Leafs or that are been more investing, it's kind of like investing in different aspects of your team. Leafs put a lot in forwards, so they're not going to put a lot in the defenseman. They're going to probably let Morgan Riley walk if he's going to get that kind of return for money. They've shown it in the past with some of their defense. That's kind of been their style. And they're going to keep investing in that, and just it's going to be different kind of matchups like a rock, paper, scissors. We're going to see which one comes out on top.
And you do have a good point, because if you look at Muzzin makes, off the top of my head, somewhere between 5'6" and 6, I think it is. It might be 6'25" or 5'6", 2'5".
I feel like
exactly.
that's the top end of defensemen that the Leafs are going to pay.
Cody got 5, so I mean, Morgan took a huge pay discount on a big contract when he first started. I don't think people really need to worry that much. I do think he is going to get re-signed by Toronto. I don't think it's going to start with a 9.
No.
I think it's probably going to be around 8.65.
But if he does get offered 9 and chooses to go elsewhere, the Leafs fan, they should be okay with that, because it's causing another team that's your competition, in my mind, to overpay and use up more of their resources on an asset that isn't valued that much as much.
Only way I would be okay if the Leafs went with that philosophy is if they then replaced him with 2 $5 million defensemen.
Yeah.
He's gonna make, or like
I guess, if it's a limited resource, then maybe, yeah.
He's gonna make 9, then give me a 5 and a 4 to replace that 9.
That's what's
if he's walking.
The salary cap is very interesting in that aspect, because it does level the playing field. Like, everyone, as long as you have the buy-in, it's like a tournament, a poker tournament. Everyone has $20. They put it up at the start of the season, and they're playing by the same set of rules. It's a game, so.
See, I look at it the opposite of from a lot of people. A lot of people stack up the team on paper and look like top to top and go down. And then once they get down the 5th, 6th guys, they kind of just lose interest and are like, oh, that doesn't matter. But where I do it is I actually flip everything upside down. In theory, in an NHL, the best league in the world, first line should cancel each other out. Second line should cancel each other out for the most part. Top 4 defensemen should cancel each other out, with the occasional elite defenseman that brings that top 4 better. So really what you're looking over the course of a season is who has the best third pairing, who has the best third and fourth lines, and who has the best backup goalie. And when you start comparing, exactly. So if you're comparing those things amongst teams, that's what makes the difference of you between a playoff team and a non-playoff team, and then the difference between a playoff team that doesn't go anywhere and a playoff team that goes a couple rounds.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
I think there's a lot of teams out there that have done some good things, but then once you get down to that bottom part of the lineup,
they haven't done. Yeah.
Then again, that's all often open for a young guy to take a spot, right? Like, that's usually where guys come out of nowhere, or a guy from Europe, or an overager from college or something. Like, you never know, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. But it also allows them to shine a little bit, because on some teams they'd be higher up, but on a solid team that has this top 6, they get protected on that third line, which rises the third line on. It's just so many complications that go into this. It's so beautiful.
Exactly. And that's the great thing about the cap, but I still think that the cap is too restrictive, and I'm still hoping that they open up some sort of luxury or franchise tag or something, because I still think that they're with everything that's happening with like the individual athletes being able to represent themselves and stuff, I feel like the NHL is almost just sitting there missing an opportunity to advance the sport, to advance the people, to make more money for their people so they can give back and raise more money for the sport. And I think that, like, yes, they're doing great. Yes, they're doing fine, but I think they could be doing greater, and I think they could be doing finer. Now, I know those terms are silly, but it's one thing to be like, yeah, we're fine, we're dandy, but like, you could be better. So like, I want to see them continue to grow.
Yeah.
We'll see with that. The cap is announced to be going up $1 million next year, from 81.5 to 82.5.
Yeah. So is it going up at the start of the season or after the season?
After the conclusion of this season and the playoffs,
they're gonna have an extra $1 million next year to spend. Okay.
Whatever. And I mean, if you're a Leaf fan, Kessel will be coming off the book, so that's 1.2 plus the increase in the cap. So technically, the Leafs have 2.2 next million that they wouldn't have this year. So it's a bigger increase than they expected, which that's a good secondary or complementary piece, or that's the ability to retain a guy like Morgan Riley, right?
Yep. Yep, for sure.
I guess shall we get into the
The off the board news of interesting fact notations.
yeah.
So
So we
Evander
got
Kane
yeah, you
back
take
in
it
the
away.
news again. Negative, of course. I don't think we can really talk about him without that kind of asterisk whenever he makes the news. So he's like on a trip over in Europe, celebrating, doing whatever. His wife, now maybe ex-wife, according to him, back at home. She starts doing some Instagram messages. I don't know if you saw the messages, but they're pretty long, and a couple of them directed at Gary Bettman and then the NHL and then the San Jose Sharks, basically saying, how can you let a player on your team bet on your games? How can you let him do that knowing he can fix the games, all this stuff? And it just explodes in one day,
Mm.
all over the place. Everyone's talking about it. But I don't know. It seems like it's just been an ever going story. It's never really stopped. He's trying to maybe escape from it over in Europe right now. Evander Kane does come in and say not a chance he does it. So now they're obviously going to investigate it, and the NHL
Mm.
said that, and he's willing to cooperate. So I don't know what else there is really to say other than off the
Not much. We
ice.
have to let the investigation go, and we have to assume that he is innocent
Mm-hmm.
unless he's proven guilty. Um, I don't know. The one thing I think we can draw a conclusion of is that everywhere he seems to go, seems to have some sort of issues, not with his production. He always produces. He always scores 30 goals plus. He always scores
Yep.
near a point per game. He gets lots of fights. He's that guy that you want on your team, that every team drools over having the idea of that type of guy in your lineup. But then when it comes to when
Oh,
you're not playing hockey and you're traveling in between games, and I don't remember the circumstances, but there was a big game he was supposed to be playing, and he took that helicopter ride to a Drake concert or something like that. And then he was late for his pregame something, and then they were going to bench him, but they couldn't. And then that's where they kind of lost power over him because he knew, at that moment they didn't bench him, so he knew he could kind of push the buttons or whatever a little bit
yeah.
more. And then it led to them trading him and stuff. So like there just seems to be a repetitiveness of where
Yeah.
it starts lurking and
and
starts
and you kind of
leaking
see
into
it
the
at
hockey
the very
production.
least in this exact story. You do have the picture of the at least the wife right now. He calls her his ex-wife now to be or whatever.
Mm.
But she's talking about how he's over in Europe, not communicating with her, none of that stuff. She's at home. She's pregnant with their second child and has another child that she's looking after. And she's talking about the bad side of seeing what this gambling and all that has done with them. She said to return the ring, allegedly,
Mm.
and just watching them close the house, has to move the house. Like all this is really alleged, and unless this goes to court or something, it's gonna be hard to know what the truth is exactly unless someone comes out and
Even then, it might not come public and it
yeah,
might be settled or whatever, but it does seem like there are clearly
yeah,
issues and there's clearly drama between Evander and Anna, whatever her name is. I don't mean whatever her name is in a negative way. I just don't know her last name, nor is that important. Evander's partner or ex-partner, whatever. Clearly, there's some issues between them,
yeah.
but I mean, that's not for everyone and all of us to talk about and decide for ourselves. But at the same time, in terms of a conversation, it is a player who is productive player who gets paid a lot of money and is owed a lot of term. I don't remember again the exact circumstances. Is it Jack Johnson that had the debt from his parents?
Yeah.
So like we've seen some similar type stuffs before, but you look at a guy like him who he basically said the rest of his career he'll be paying to pay off debt, and when he retires, he'll be lucky to have anything in the green. He'll be lucky to have any kind of money from his entire career.
Yeah.
It would be really sad to see a guy like Evander have to say the same thing. But then when you look at the foreclosure of the house and stuff
The
like that,
receipts, yeah.
yeah, seems to be some smoke or some receipts as well. So when it really comes down to it, I just hope that, for the best of both of them, they can both figure out whether it's
Yeah,
together or apart. And
definitely.
and get healthy. And if Evander does have some serious gambling issues, which it does appear he has some issues outside of hockey, I hope that the Sharks support him and
Yeah.
try and get him some help. And I almost wonder if it's best he takes this year off and just San Jose says like we'll still pay you, but like we want you for the next 5 years of your contract. We don't want you disappearing and
Yeah,
knows,
it's
right?
almost
Because
like
often
you
that's
invest a little bit in this human being. The returns are
exactly,
possible. Whereas if you try to like
exactly.
just push them, push them, push them, it's going to result, even if just financially speaking, it could result in more money lost down the road because you can't play 3 seasons. Or who
Yeah, and then you
knows?
hear that his teammates don't want him back. You hear
Yeah,
that San Jose has tried to trade him and this failed. It seems like we might be on a crash course for potential buyout or something, which could be
but
a savior for Evander.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
got
buyout would be
debts.
good. But if I start seeing the Sharks pushing to like get the contract terminated and just like completely like, kind of like that kind of thing going against Evander, that's where I'm going to start
Yeah.
being like, damn.
At that point, you got to believe that there's some more receipts or smoke that we're
Yeah,
not
I would just hope
privy
that they
to
would rather help him than turn on him. But
and cast him away. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you got to think somebody's going to be interested in him, but let's just hope he gets the help he needs.
yep,
Speaking about help that they need, some people that were in the Chicago Blackhawks organization, and some people that are just not aware to this even situation happening.
yeah,
I think everybody needs to be more aware of the situation. And if anybody's not familiar with what I'm talking about, I wouldn't even start to give the situation justice. You should check into Rick Westhead. And even the Steve Dangle podcast this last week had a really, really good. The last two or three actually have been good. Plus, they had Rick Westhead on their episode, and they were just speaking about the incidents and like the actual facts of the legal incidents and the ramifications and legal stories that have been put on the record about what has happened or what's claimed to have happened and stuff.
yep,
And when it comes down to it, it seems like a lot of people are just trying to pretend it didn't happen
yeah, it
or
does.
pretend to be like, oh, that was 10 years ago. I'm different now. That's fine, and that might be true, but the victims are still victims, and the victims are claiming their lives are destroyed.
Yep.
So we aren't the ones that should be sitting here saying, "Oh, good for them" or "good for whatever." Like we have to remember victims in this situation, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, and just the fact of the not acknowledging it, that means that they're not working on. To me, at least, it means that they're not working on a solution for this to never happen again. So you gotta at least acknowledge something's happened, and then put things in place in your structure to.
Well, the latest names that have come on record to confirm that this has happened are people like Brian Campbell, Patrick Sharp, Ray Crawford,
Who, Crawford?
Ray Crawford,
Oh,
former goalie of the Blackhawks. Though that's the secondary leadership team of those runs.
yeah,
So like if they were aware of it, they were they've confirmed that people would make comments, very inappropriate and rude comments to players about what was going on. Clearly they knew what was going on, and clearly people knew what was going on to make light of the situation or try to make light of the situation. So like there's no way that more people didn't know. And they're claiming that people like the GM and the people of hockey operations and stuff, they're all claiming they had no awareness of anything that's going on. That you could tell me how many milligrams of salt went into that player's body that day. Don't give me that.
at the very highest level, it's possible. Like there's this eventually when you're up that high enough, you would think there's a filter of that gets information to you, right? And I would
Yes.
assume there's a filter before you that is like, holy fuck, I can never let this guy find out.
All those guys below were all in tandem for a long time together.
No,
So,
yeah, I know, but
yes, they might not have
where did the
known, but
filter
if
end?
they
We don't
did,
know where the filter ended at the top right now. There's
fair,
always a filter. So
fair.
maybe it went all the way to the CEO. I find that hard to believe based on how much he has to handle in a day to day life. Those kind of
The thing
things
that
kind of
bothers me
get
most about
small.
this, though, is that the Chicago Blackhawks are not denying that it happened. No one is
Well,
denying that
that's
it
smart though
happened.
because it did happen.
They're denying they had any obligation to do anything, which I have a huge problem with personally.
I think okay, I didn't realize that they're saying that. I thought the Top Guns were just saying they didn't know about it, so they couldn't do anything.
Oh, they're saying what were we to do about it? We're not obligated to go to the police.
Okay. Well,
Some people are saying that that's okay, and I'm like, in what world? Let's just take it out of hockey for a second, out of sports. You're working at your job, whatever your job is, McDonald's, car cleaner, insurance broker, whatever it is, and your boss witnesses you being sexually assaulted on the floor. They turn their back, they go back to their office, they close the door, continue their workday. That person makes a complaint, and that person is found to have just ignored it and turned and walked away. They are just as guilty. They are just as much the problem.
mhm.
They just as much need to get out of that position of power and leave.
I agree with that. That should happen. I don't know, like Illinois law, if they have to. If they don't have to, they in theory have. I'm not saying it's ethical. I'm just saying when it comes down to the letter of the law, they might be right.
If you want to claim the letter of the law, that's fine. Whatever, I
Yeah.
understand that.
And
If
it
that's
seems like
one
that's what
side
they're
of the
doing. That's like
coin,
their only hope at this point.
that would be one side of the coin, and
Yeah.
the other reverse side of the coin would be this inclusivity claim that everybody can play. You're gay, straight, whatever, black, white, it doesn't matter. Everyone can play in the NHL. You can't claim that, then also say we have no obligation.
Oh no, I that's they're just trying to avoid like the worst of the worst. That's all. They're like that's all.
Just avoiding. And then that comes back to the whole draft issue with Montreal taking that guy who renounced himself with the draft. And the fact of the matter is that a piece of paper he renounced himself from the draft, and a piece of paper landed on Gary Bettman's desk saying, "Hey, do we need to actually formally exclude him from the draft, or do we just leave it as is and no one will take him?" He said, whatever, no one will take him." He was wrong. The Montreal Canadiens drafted him, and he came out and he said, "Oh, it's disgusting. It's appalling. I have two daughters. I can't believe this happened."
Yep.
Well, where's the accountability sit, sir? Because
It's
you're
on
the
him.
one that could have made a change, and now you're claiming and trying to get people to feel sorry for you because you have two daughters, and God forbid that would happen. No, it's not about you,
Take
sir.
some accountability.
Like, yeah, like you could have prevented this from happening. You could have prevented this PR. Then you take it back to the whole thing about Marc Bergevin and how I said earlier about how some people were saying that he's pissed. He's pissed that he lost a chance at the cup to a team that's way over the cap, and from here on out, he doesn't care what
He has
off
to
ice,
do. Yeah.
whatever. He wants a cup,
He's
and
gonna build the best team he can.
yeah, there's blood in the water. And then he drafts this guy. He was the runner-up for Anthony Giangelo. They talked to Jake Virtanen. Then you see him doing this, and then you again reroute that to Chicago. What we were talking about. Marc Bergevin was one of the guys in the player personnel spots in Chicago. Because he's having a little hissy fit, and because he's mad, he's doing whatever because he doesn't care. But then he claims, "Oh, I never knew about that."
You don't think the NHL is gonna fight back against him? He's smaller than the
You do.
NHL.
You do. Has he
They'll,
done wrong?
they'll find a way.
NHL didn't ban the player, and he drafted him.
Oh, questionable hit throughout the season. 10-game suspension.
I'm sure that will happen.
I'm just trying to
PA
predict.
would get involved there.
It's funny because we'll never be able to accurately predict what's going to happen. It's impossible.
Yeah,
I just like
yeah.
throwing out funny things like some of these things we've seen since this podcast began have just been we would have never thought imaginable.
Yeah.
So that's always the most exciting part is seeing how these teams are going to react. Montreal's reacted crazily. Leafs fans always getting upset about something. We have Sharks getting into drama, Coyotes, always drama somewhere in the NHL.
Yeah, expansion and all that other stuff.
Yep.
Like I'm in a very difficult spot for myself right now because, like, on one hand, obviously I'm a Leafs fan, or I'm trying to be a Leafs fan. I'm not really exactly sure where I'm at with that right now, but like,
You're coming to join me on the sport fan. You have a top team, but you really don't care.
exactly. And once you look at a lot of people who do cover sports, they kind of lose their team after a while anyways,
Yep.
and they just kind of appreciate the
Beauty
best
games.
of what the sport has to offer. day in or season in, season out, instead of, the roller coaster ride that is a fan of, the ups and downs. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely down on them right now, and I'm definitely kind of like, I want to watch them because he's the best player to ever wear the jersey, and for me to look back and not watch him would be kind of silly.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I put McDavid on all the time for that very reason.
Yeah. And like, to be honest, like his shot and everything is just something to watch. His celebrations and everything. He loves scoring goals. It makes him happy. And I can't miss out on that just for because when that's gone, or if that's gone, I don't know. Like that's gonna be something that's gonna be hard to miss, right?
Yeah.
Or hard not to miss. But then you look outside the sport and you look at these incidents with the Blackhawks and stuff like that, and how the NHL just refuses to take accountability, yet they claim to be involved in these right to play and equal rights for everybody programs. You have that first, I forget his name right now, but the first guy who came out as gay right before draft night, or a couple nights before
Hmm.
draft night. Like, that guy is stronger than a lot of other people, and like, good on him for doing it. But like, with everything going on, it doesn't seem like it just proves to the outsiders who say hockey has a toxic culture. It proves that it truly does.
It does, yeah.
And from somebody who played on the lower levels of hockey myself, there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of parents who get involved. There's a lot of older people taking their shit out on younger people, which is not fair, and it's very toxic. And then you get people with referees who are there for the power, and there's just so much toxic energy in the environment of hockey. And when you have stuff like this come out at the NHL level, which is supposed to be the role model and the epitome of hockey in the world, or at least in North America.
Oh, we lost him. Hello? Torrey, no. That might be it, folks. If we don't get Torrey back and we choose to wrap this up, this is probably going to be the end of the podcast. Quality goes down right now when I am the only one. I think he is texting me too. He lost power. We'll see if he wants to join back in, but I don't know if I want to edit this one, so we might just end it here and then add the next one on. We're pretty much getting down to the end of our topics. Of course, we're getting involved with Blackhawks and all that stuff, but on our next podcast, we're probably going to come back and start talking about the season, because it's going to be here before we know it, of course. We'll see. Yeah, it looks like we're just going to call it. Thanks, everyone, for watching. You probably clicked off by now, but if you haven't, make sure you check out these videos, and we will see you for the next episode. Thanks.